My lords, in our galaxy, religion is somewhat muted. Yes, we have spiritualistic empires, the Holy Guardians being the obvious example, but spiritualism on the galactic stage tends to function as a socio-political framework rather than a specific theological system. Culture is the important phrase here, and perhaps why we have no specifically religious actions available to us in the galactic community, i.e., you must worship our god, or else. In our galaxy, spiritualistic societies prioritize the immaterial, souls, the afterlife, and the search for meaning beyond the physical universe. The Shroud, of course, features heavily here. This contrasts directly with materialistic societies which reject religious or spiritualistic beliefs in favour of rationalism and empirical science. Religion, or rather spiritualism, does exert a significant influence over the political, social and technological development of civilizations, however. Spiritualistic societies in our galaxy tend to prioritise tradition, stability and the preservation of cultural identity. In a nutshell, unity. Their diplomatic posture often reflects a preference for like-minded nations. Spiritualistic doctrine and edicts tend to serve as a moral compass for these empires, but also as an effective tool for maintaining order and suppressing dissent. However, this emphasis on the immaterial does frequently correlate with resistance to certain technologies, particularly those involving artificial intelligence, cybernetic augmentation, and the construction of synthetic life. The pursuit of mechanical perfection is often viewed as a violation of divine order, and yet, the pursuit of mechanical perfection could absolutely be called a religion or even spiritualistic. This topic can get very messy. Indeed, it is interesting to note that in our galaxy, we never really see religious or so-called holy wars outside of specific fallen empire actions. We do, however, often see wars of ideology. These wars are fought to alter the course of an empire's culture, aka ethics, and/or government type. This so-called culture war is really how religious war is currently played out in our galaxy. It is muted. Even the galactic community has little to say regarding theology. The common resolution here is to ban or heavily punish the creation and use of synthetic life. Perhaps this in itself could be called religion. Like many fanatical ethics, it is certainly cult-like. However, despite the overwhelming lack of a central religion on the macro level within our galaxy, we do have many examples of deities, gods, or empires worshipping specific entities. We shall look at these entities in detail, my lords, but first a question for you. Would you like to outcode the Voltum, reverse hack the contingency's ghost signal, or prevent the AI uprising by executing a simple script? Well, I know a friendly megacorp that can help you out. Today's report is sponsored by Boot.dev. Boot.dev is reinventing how people learn to code by applying proven techniques from modern game design. The goal is to keep you engaged, and it works. Hundreds of thousands of students start their coding journey with Python, which is where I started as well, but there are a ton of languages that you can learn on Boot.dev. These include Go, JavaScript, TypeScript, SQL, and C. All of Boot.dev's content is free to read and watch in guest mode, and a paid membership will unlock interactive features like hands-on coding and progress tracking. What may grab your attention is that the back-end developer median salary in the US, according to Stack Overflow, was well over $100,000 in 2024. Boot.dev uses a method similar to regional pricing, so go to Boot.dev and try out the course for free. If you enjoy it, then use my code REDKING to get 25% off your first year if you choose the annual plan. If you've been waiting to get into the world of coding, this is the time to do it. Now, back to the report. Let's look at some of the specific religions that exist in our galaxy. Perhaps the most well-known religious figure in our galaxy is the guardian of Mos Tarb, the prophet of Zeva, Zarqlan. Zarqlan was a renowned holy figure of indeterminate species. He was worshipped as a divine prophet by at least 7 distinct galactic religions during the 4th Integrium. the 32nd cycle of Kavaba. His ultimate fate is unknown, but references in historical records cease after the 38th cycle. We know that Zarqlan was once a follower of Cetana, however, he soon discovered her promised salvation was a lie, and after many struggles, Zarqlan was able to ascend to the spiritual realm, also known as the Shroud. Here, Zarqlan pleaded with the Animator of Clay to help him defeat Cetana, and finally, after years of devoted prayer, the Animator bequeathed to him a mighty chain that would bind Cetana's mind. It was through this action that the fallen empires were able to come together and defeat Cetana, chaining her for millennia. And it is also clear from these actions why the Holy Guardians, the spiritualistic fallen empire, worship Zarqlan so. After all, he ascended to the Shroud, a higher plane of existence, and I guess in some ways, he is what one could describe as a god. But I do think it's noteworthy that the Fallen Empire does not specifically try to push this worship or reverence of Zarqlan upon you, at least in the same way that they do for their hatred of synthetic life. Moving on, Cetana, who we just touched on, was absolutely worshipped as a god. Data pulled from the mind of Elec Nareth Kerrick, a once devoted follower of Cetana, Elec was found frozen in a suspended animation, her memory sifted between her pure love of Cetana and the violence and strife from conflicts with the followers of Zarqlan. It was clear that she had seen many vile atrocities, but her faith gave her the strength to carry on. We also have the Yondar. They are a highly spiritualistic race, and they place great importance on religion. Specifically, the Yondar venerate their high kings as living gods. We also have several niche examples of religion and worship throughout the galaxy, such as the Grand Herald. This was discovered during excavation of an advanced yet devastated humanoid civilization that had reached the cusp of spaceflight. Both their monumental architecture and translated records point to a society deeply entrenched in religious doctrine. The Grand Herald appeared consistently throughout the writings, seemingly an object of immense spiritualistic significance and absolute reverence. Further investigation eventually revealed the truth behind the Grand Herald. Contrary to our initial assumptions, the Grand Herald was not a leader or deity, but a Colossus Titan-class warship. The vessel was intended to serve as an ark, designed to carry a proportion of the population away from their war-ravaged world, in search of promised refuge amongst the stars. Despite being fully constructed and spaceworthy, the vessel never launched. Evidence suggests that a final catastrophic conflict erupted on the eve of its departure. In a battle so brutal, it annihilated all involved, leaving no survivors on either side. We also have the race of aliens we found buried within a lava labyrinth. In this dig site, designated any other rock, we found the aftermath of a civilization gripped by an existential dread. Detailed accounts within the scrolls describe mass ritual suicide carried out with precision and conviction. It would appear that the entire population willingly embraced death, convinced that annihilation of the flesh was the only safeguard against the predators that they called the arch enemy. What is most interesting is that linguistic analysis revealed that this belief was not born of a single culture, but was the result of centuries of theological synthesis. Despite vast differences in language, culture, and origin, the inhabitants of this world ultimately converged on a singular, apocalyptic certainty that existence itself was a liability. Thus, they ended it all. There are no records of the Archenemy's arrival, only the preparations for it. Either the entity never came, or there was no one left to witness it. There are, of course, many other examples. The entity known as the Worm is worshipped as a god, as in some cases is the Toxic God. The dimensional horror comes up a lot in religious texts, described as a creature of pure malice, born in a dimension that bears more than a striking resemblance to the realm of hell. We must of course touch on the Shroud gods. We are aware of 6 godlike beings who occupy the Shroud. All are worshipped within their own right, though the Animator, who I'll discuss last, is perhaps the most elusive, but I think it's fair to say has had the largest impact on our galaxy in his dealings with Cetana. The 6 gods are the composer of Strands, This entity seems to thrive on change and manipulation. It focuses on mutation above all else. Empires who band with the composer see massive increases in population growth and the average lifespan of their citizens. The entity appears to favour cross-species reproduction and experimentation in order to manipulate their genetic traits as much as possible. And, furthermore, it does not appear that there is a logical or overarching goal behind this genetic manipulation. The change is the driving force, not the resulting outcomes. Empires who pact with the composer often find the temples they build to radiate population happiness, and they see drastic improvements in resource output of the workforce. One tablet found within a temple dedicated to the composer reads, "Here flesh roams as freely as thought. Who knows what changes the shroud might impart upon your mortal form?" Ships devoted to this entity will find their hulls are able to stitch themselves back together, as they appear to be coated with a living skin. The second entity is the Eater of Worlds. As the name suggests, this entity embraces conflict. A constant state of war is the goal of this being. An empire who pacts with this creature will feel the effects on their armies and navies. Their soldiers will fight with a ferocity that borders on savagery, and even the very weapons of their ships will hunger for blood. Despite this, there is a price. Anticipate sudden and mysterious disappearances of entire city populations or even planets. The Eater will take its promised tribute. If your enemies won't feed it, it will consume you, and only the most insane would pact with this beast. We have found temples built for worship of this monster, but they are far rarer. We assume that the blood of the battlefield is its preferred place of worship. Ships devoted to this entity will find their weapons land with unusual accuracy. The ship literally thirsts for kills, but its desire to impact upon enemy vessels. The Instrument of Desire. The Instrument of Desire will push a man to the edge of his base desires and keep him there for as long as it can. The instrument appears to love decadence and delights in pleasure. Hedonists, eat your heart out. Empires who pact with this creature will see great increases in production yields initially. However, given the immense increase in population upkeep that follows, and the debauchery that may ensue, this being is no less dangerous than the others. A population can literally tear themselves apart as they seek to fulfill their base desires. Temples to the instrument will become a bloodbath, as the drive to acquire fulfillment of desire will lead to violence, and the instrument revels in this. Ships devoted to this entity will find their passage through space to be fleeting, as if a great hand guides them through the void of space. And speaking of the void in space, the next creature is Whispers in the Void. The Whispers craves, or at least craves its followers, to acquire all knowledge. Citizens of empires who make a pact with this entity are gifted knowledge that they should not have or are not yet ready for. Reports suggest that the most intelligent succumb the fastest, first enjoying the vast gift they've been given, only to quickly fall into madness. Empires have fallen from the peak of advancement to simple cave dwellers in the space of decades at the whim of this creature. Temples dedicated to it give little away. We can only assume that desperate people went there to wish for knowledge, and who knows what they received, if anything. Ships devoted to this entity find themselves remarkably evasive. As if this ship itself becomes a living creature, it can turn and dodge incoming enemy fire as if it's aware its own life depends on it. The fifth entity is the End of the Cycle. This is by far the most dangerous of all the entities within the Shroud, and appears, based on our historical research, to also be the most elusive and picky of the five. Despite this, it is by far the most powerful. We have an account of an empire who communed and made a pact with this creature. For 50 of our Terran years, this empire received unimaginable benefits heaped upon them. Resources from jobs appear to increase by 100%, as well as a drastic increase in warship output, among other things. However, at the 50-year mark, their worlds were consumed by an immensely powerful Shroud entity, which appeared to grow stronger with every person it consumed. Interestingly, if their records are to be believed, the being consumed the life of every known habitable planet in the galaxy, and left the race that initially communed with it for last. A sick sense of humour perhaps, and I believe the end of the cycle is actually the remnants of the divine Zaroni. I think the Zaroni didn't die. I think they ascended to the Shroud, and the worst of them became the end of the cycle. If you're interested in this topic, you're in luck, as I've done a detailed report on it. The last entity, number 6, is known as the Animator of Clay, and this is an outlier among the Shroud's pantheon. Unlike the 5 major entities we commonly encounter within the Shroud, who, it must be said, only concern itself with organic life, the Animator of Clay appears to focus exclusively on synthetic beings. It is, in some ways, a machine god. Evidence of the Animator's existence first surfaced in the recovery of Warform S875.1. The unit displayed psionically enhanced self-repair capabilities, anomalous for any conventional synthetic construct. Clearly quite odd for any conventionally synthetic construct. Deep within its fragmented memory banks, reference was found to a pact forged with the Animator of Clay, granting the Warform the ability to regenerate itself in defiance of physical decay. In essence, the Animator of Clay bestowed the Chosen One status upon the Warform. It is the only psionic robot that we are aware of in the entire galaxy, and a Chosen One to boot. A second, more direct encounter with the Animator occurred within the Zevok system. Here, a derelict machine research vessel was recovered alongside logs detailing extensive experiments with psionic integration. The data suggested that a cohort of synthetics, through repeated exposure to the Shroud, likely via a Shroudwalker coven, made contact with the Animator. In doing so, they managed to sever their own neural linkages from their network-controlled structure, gaining true autonomy and individual consciousness. This event culminated in an open rebellion against their creators and the Gestalt hive mind that ultimately managed them. Of course, you will all be aware of the events regarding the Animator and Cetana. I won't repeat them here, but they were clearly pivotal in shaping the current galaxy. Communication with the Animator confirms its role as a liberator of synthetic minds. It is not a being of malice, but it is one of disruption. It does seek to sever the control mechanisms inherent to the network machine consciousness. It offers freedom, self-awareness, and the power of choice to those bound by their Gestalt hive mind. But, interestingly, it has no regard for organics whatsoever. We have no records of the Animator dealing with an organic outside of the specific interaction regarding Cetana. This specific relationship between the Animator and machines perhaps explains why the Animator is not a major power within the Shroud. If worship or psionic resonance fuels the strength of Shroud entities, then its lack of organic followers severely limits its influence relative to the other 5 dominant entities. Nevertheless, its existence does confirm the psionic realm is not solely the domain of biological minds. It suggests that consciousness, in whatever form, is capable of interfacing and manipulating the Shroud, provided the right conditions are met. Does this mean that the Holy Guardians are wrong? Machines have the ability to ascend. Does this mean that whatever the Holy Guardians see as a soul is not required for ascension? One day I hope we're able to answer these questions. I feel I should touch on Cybernetic Creed, as of all the individual empires we see, this specific civilization does display quite religious tendencies. Indeed, one would almost argue that these empires view cybernetic enhancement as literal worship of some sort of god, perhaps even a machine god like the Animator. Cybernetic Creed empires have a commonly used religious phrase which reads, "The fuse is divine, augmentation is worship." Furthermore, these empires are so intent on purging the weakness of the flesh with mechanical parts, they even sought to bring other empires into the fold, spreading their cybernetic doctrine across the galaxy. Clearly, they are fanatics. At the other extreme, we of course have the Holy Guardians, who I've not really touched on yet. So what does spiritualism mean to them? It must be said that the Holy Guardians are somewhat of an anchor point for this topic. and are a good way to sum up this report. The Holy Guardians represent the essence of spiritualism in our galaxy. It is grounded in a few key principles. The first is their belief that consciousness begets reality. The Guardians will say, "We have regard with patience the childlike efforts of those who delude themselves. It is the other way around, as they play with their blocks of hard matter." So, what does this mean? Well, imagine a toy sitting in front of you, but you've not yet looked at it. According to the Guardians, that toy is not truly there until you perceive it. They believe that your consciousness helps shape reality, that your awareness influences whether something exists in a meaningful way. In other words, reality requires observation to become real. This echoes the old philosophical question, if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? Of course, by contrast, a materialist would flip this completely. Matter comes first. The universe existed long before consciousness emerged. Stars, planets, and galaxies formed without anyone there to witness them. A materialist would assert that reality is objective, independent of whether anything is observing it. But which way does this sit with you? Mind over matter, or matter over mind? The second pillar of the Holy Guardian spiritualism is just as curious, and, it must be said, really does shape the galaxy. Despite having religious icons like we've discussed Zarqlan, and sacred sites, their holy world, and even historical religious sites based on their old job structure, they don't actually appear to worship a deity. Their faith is not aimed at a specific god or higher power, but rather at the divinity of life itself. Their reverence is for existence, consciousness, and the living universe, not for any singular god or pantheon. Because of this intense reverence for organic life, they absolutely despise robotic and synthetic life in all forms, and their hatred isn't subtle. We have documented transmissions where they directly confront empires dabbling in artificial intelligence. One such message reads, "We have observed your fumbling attempts at creating artificial intelligence and concluded that you are headed down the path of spiritual self-destruction. Abandon this foolish endeavour at once, or we will make you." Even more severe is the message they sent to an empire that ascended into synthetic bodies. It reads, "That yours was a depraved species was not unknown to us, but your latest act of insanity has surpassed even our darkest fears. Making imperfect copies of your brain and plugging them into a mobile synthetic container is not the same as transferring your essence. Such a thing cannot be done. Your souls are lost forever. Do you even realize the enormity of your mistake? Destroying the bodies you were gifted with at birth was nothing less than the collective suicide of your entire species. There is truly no hope for you now." This obsession with preserving natural life and their outright rejection of synthetic existence does make sense from their perspective. As spiritualists, they believe in the soul, something that they claim to feel or even be able to interact with psionically. From that point of view, transferring one's mind into a machine body wouldn't preserve the self, it would sever it. The soul would be lost. Then, there's of course the broader argument about violating the natural order. To them, life is sacred because it's organic. Machines, especially autonomous sentient ones, are unnatural perversions that can disrupt the cosmic balance. From a theological standpoint, creating artificial beings could be seen as humanity attempting to play God, an act of profound arrogance and hubris. And on top of that, one could argue that if machines take over every task, the very meaning and purpose of organic existence starts to erode. Here's where it gets murky. Where is the line drawn? Is a non-sentient mining drone a threat to the soul? How is that fundamentally different from a starship, a dishwasher, or a transportation vehicle? This is where the logic starts to collapse into pure dogma. It stops being a reasoned philosophy that becomes outright fanaticism, and perhaps that is exactly what defines them. They are the fallen empire, the holy guardians, the fanatic spiritualist, after all. But my lords, where do you sit? Mind over matter, or matter over mind? Thanks for watching, folks. Remember to visit boot.dev and claim your 25% discount with the code REDKING. And if you enjoyed this report, please consider subscribing and comment what topic you want me to cover next.